Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Enough creepy stuff. Let's share some stories about encounters with benevolent spirits. I'll go first. About a few years back, I worked for a pretty major bank as a risk analyst. I was responsible for covering the trading desk from 8 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. the next morning to make sure our international traders had help on hand if they needed it. Well, usually the building is pretty much empty when I start working, except for the one FX trader who shared my hours. Let's call him Jim. Jim and I got along, since we were the only two guys in the office for most of the nights. We'd usually share a plate of tacos or nachos and just chat. I asked him why he opted for the night shift, and he told me his kid had leukemia. He needed the extra money. Anyway, it went on like this for, a good year or so. Jim was a good guy and we got along. Then the economy started going down the shitters, with banks going down left and right. His kid died around the same time, and his career was taking a massive hit at the same time. He went into this depression spiral that ended up killing him from alcohol poisoning. It turned out he was a single parent, and no one really showed up for his funeral except his mom and a few of us co-workers. So long story short, flash forward a few weeks, the bank's ledger was heavily in the red and they couldn't afford to replace him. So they outsourced his job to some guy in Singapore, and for the longest time I was there by my lonesome during my shifts. Then one night, shortly after I began working, I got a call from reception asking me to come down, as there was someone looking for me. So I went down, and the receptionist said a tall gentleman came looking for me but left. As I went back upstairs, I walked past the trading desk, and I saw that Jim's computer was on. I got a little worried. I checked the doors. No security breaches. I called our IT guys and asked if anyone's been logging in. Sure enough, and they threw a fit. Someone was logged in under Jim's credentials from the IP of his usual desk. The account had been disabled from trading, so no orders went out, but we saw a long list of attempts. They were buys, sells, mostly for Asian currencies, which were Jim's specialty. I quickly went in and logged the machine off. The IT guys were real confused. I was kind of shaken. The next night it happened again. Same thing. His computer was on. Someone logged in, orders were placed. This escalated to the head of the trader support group, and everyone was investigating a potential security breach. Well, the next night, I purposefully had my dinner in the trading room. Sure enough, around 10 o'clock, his machine suddenly turned on and logged itself in. I watched orders being entered, though they didn't go anywhere. I felt this warm presence around me, and I just kind of sat there. The lights were on, which made me feel a bit better. That was the last night this happened. On a hunch, I got together with our quant and a few analysts who were good friends of Jim, and we took some of our own money. I put in $1,000 and invested in the list of FX futures that Jim was attempting to buy. Together, the three of us pooled in about $4,000. Sure enough, a few weeks later, our portfolio went up and we managed to almost double our investment. We took some of the original investment back and donated the remaining profit, about $4,000, to the Children's Leukemia Foundation, under Jim's name. Anyway, a bit anticlimactic, but that's par for most ghost stories.
This happened several years ago, but I will try to be detailed. B15 out kayaking with a friend. We, being stupid dumb kids, decided it's a good idea to go out into a large sound while there are rough, choppy waves. This sound separates the island I live on and the mainland. With 100% visibility, it is barely possible to make out the opposite shore. Idiots.jpg. We are going fine when this large swell, probably 3 feet, hits me broadside. Enough to roll me over. But as I try to flip over, another one hits me again, and I slide out of the overturned kayak. I hang on to the paddle and kayak while my friend circles around to help me. The current is too rough, and the waves too frequent to get back in. Realize holding on to the kayak is pulling me out of the sound and into the sea. My friend does everything he can to pull us back in, but he isn't strong enough. I let go of the kayak, and he tries to pull me but can't either. Tell him to go for help. Luckily, I still have the paddle and life preserver on, not that stupid. The kayak is lost from sight within 5 minutes, doing everything I can to fight the current, but I can feel myself going further out. I look for my friend and can no longer see him. Visibility is terrible, and the waves are picking up. I notice a lot of fog moving in. I keep fighting the current as best as I can for what seems like hours. I am exhausted and really cold. My extremities are going numb. My movements are sluggish and uncoordinated. My breathing is quick and shallow. It occurs to me that I'm going to die. All of a sudden, I feel something grab me. Not like the current pushed me or a wave picked me up and carried me. Something had actually grabbed me, firmly and with a tight grip. At first, I think that it is a bull shark, or perhaps I got my foot caught in a submerged object. Try to yank it free, but it won't let go. Think I am in shock as there is no pain. But I can still feel the thing grabbing me, and it doesn't feel like teeth or a rough object, but more like a hand. I don't know if it was the exhaustion, or my mind simply trying to block out the impossible, but I can distinctly feel a hand, and it is pulling me. I fight it even harder, all kinds of crazy shit running through my head like it is some siren come to pull me under or such nonsense. I am screaming, and I can feel tears as well as seawater on my face. Never before have I been so frightened before in my life, and never before have I cried as hard. I notice I still have the paddle in my hand, and using it try to bash whatever has hold of me. I keep jabbing it in the general direction of my ankle, but other than hitting my foot a few times, I hit nothing. I realize it is not pulling me down, but rather towards shore. It couldn't have lasted more than half a minute, but in all that time, despite my fighting and thrashing about, I was actually being pulled against the current towards shore. And never once did the grip falter, slacken, or even tighten. It never so much as flexed. Suddenly, whatever had grabbed me let go. Floating there, the current now taking me out to shore, I poke around a few times with the paddle to see if anything is still there, when my paddle strikes the bottom. Quickly, I dig the paddle as deep as it will go to anchor myself in place. Now all I have to do is hold on. Nothing else grabs me. Nothing but the pulling of the current and the frequent waves. I hold on for dear life for maybe an hour or two when I hear a motorboat and someone calling my name on a bullhorn. I shout, "Help! Over here!" and all that stuff for a little while. Visibility is still bad, and there is a slight fog settling over the sound. Finally, see flashing lights and then a Coast Guard boat. They take me to the hospital, and I give the nurses a statement. Told them I distinctly felt something grab me. They exchange looks, and one of them tells me that I was in shock and disoriented, and that I was imagining it. I drop the subject, and they release me. I didn't realize it later as I was just so scared at the time, and just glad to be alive afterwards. But I know now that whatever happened, whether it was a natural or paranormal phenomenon, it saved my life. At this particular sound, the bottom shifts all the time. Where there could be a sandbar one day overnight, it could be somewhere else. As far out as I was, the only way I could have touched bottom was to hit a sandbar. Whatever it was, it pulled me to the sandbar, despite all of my resisting. I know of no other way to explain it, and the Coast Guard told me that as far out as I was, and as bad as the current was, I was extremely lucky to find a sandbar. I still don't believe in spirits or the paranormal, but what happened that day I will probably never understand.
I've had a number of odd series of dreams through my life. Things like being given trials to overcome that have prevented nightmares once completed, and one particular time where I may have been targeted by a malevolent spirit, only to end up destroying them in the end. Weird stuff from the mind of a chronic semi-lucid dreamer. The most recent one was actually a series of dreams. I tend to remember most of my dreams vividly, and go through periods of time where nearly every night I will become semi-lucid, realizing I am in a dream, but electing not to take any sort of direct control, and instead go with the flow. It's led to some interesting developments, where over time I have been able to hone certain dream skills, such as hovering and gliding, walking on ceilings and walls, a limited telekinesis. I'm still working on that one. And most importantly, to this particular story I have, a general mastery over the form of my body and mental state, including waking myself up intentionally. But for a particular story, probably the most fitting for the thread is a series of dreams I had not too far back. I was having a pretty normal dream where I was doing my own thing, following whatever path my mind laid out for me, and I was overcome with an overwhelming sense of dread and malice aimed toward me. This is very unusual, since after completing a trial while dreaming as a kid, that's a whole other story. I only have proper nightmares once every few years. True to my feeling, at one point, the environment changed to that of an abandoned construction site deep underground, and I became aware of a shadowy figure standing in front of one of the floodlights. I decided I wanted none of that, and forced myself into wakefulness, though it felt like a mental struggle to do so. I woke in a sleep paralysis fashion, familiar to me, except instead of being unable to move, my full body was jittering and seizing until I fully woke. I encountered this entity once more later that week, again forcing myself awake when it properly manifested, following the same dread and feeling of danger. And then over that weekend, my roommate's GF, a practicing Wiccan, brought up the topic of bad vibes in the home. Everyone confirmed a general feeling of unease and tension, and I described my dream to her. She told me I must have been most in tune in the house, and a malevolent spirit had decided to reveal itself to me, which isn't entirely out of the question. This house had claimed the life of at least one person in the past, and people who have lived there did claim unexplainable happenings. That night we did an impromptu ritual, cleansing the home with sage and etc., casting out spirits that meant ill, and welcoming those willing to live in harmony. I should specify that I am a skeptic when it comes to such things, and am ultimately not a believer in Wiccan practices. In particular, during this ritual, I declined to take part in certain sections that require a masculine aggression, since that really just isn't my vibe and I know it. Nevertheless, we completed the ritual, and as far as I know, my roommates were no longer bothered by our spirit. Except me, of course. About a week later, the dreams returned. But like I mentioned before, I grew familiar with this entity. The tells that they were coming to encroach in my dream, and I had less and less patience with them, so eventually I would just wake myself up the moment I felt the mood turning. I even quickly came to shake off the associated sleep paralysis in moments after waking. I moved out of that house a bit later for unrelated reasons, and the dreams followed me. Until one night, I felt the usual signs, and decided I was done having my sleep interrupted. Rather than wait for the entity to appear, as my surroundings shifted to a disorganized mash of dilapidated hotel bedrooms, I twisted my body into a monstrous, barely human form, becoming the demon of my dream and forcing the entity to share my dream body. And as planned, I felt the entity crushed up against my mind inside the single body, and I mentally crushed it down into nothing, eliminating it from existence. Since then, it's been maybe a year or two, I have not had a single entity invade my dreams at night.
This happened a while ago, either December 2020 or January 2021, but I remember what happened clearly since it was bizarre and the only paranormal encounter I personally ever witnessed in the house I live in. It was snowing a lot, and this was around 2 o'clock to 3 a.m. at night. My little sister and I were awake and we went outside in the backyard to look at the falling snow without informing our parents. They were in their room along with my brother. The whole backyard was covered in snow and everything was very silent and still apart from the falling snow. After looking and walking in the falling snow in the backyard for about 10 minutes, me and my sister both heard my name being called loudly by my father's voice, and we looked and saw a figure standing right from my room's window overlooking us and staring us down. It looked like my dad's silhouette. We thought we were in trouble since our dad is strict and overprotective. However, both of us did agree that we also got an eerie feeling at the same time since something felt off. We went back into the house and we both went into my room, and it was empty. Then my sister went into our parents' room and asked our dad about it, and he didn't even know we were outside and that he didn't call my name. We also recalled later that the way the silhouette was standing, it would have been impossible for a person to physically stand like that by my window, since there is a bedpost in the way. There were some paranormal events in my house before this happened. The other paranormal events were on the second floor and were reported by separate Airbnb guests that rented the second floor. One guest complained of hearing threatening disembodied voices, and two separate guests complained of seeing an unidentified person in the dark that stood completely still and didn't say anything to them but watched them from the bottom of the stairs. I think this might have been a shadow person, since the guests couldn't describe the face or clothes, saying it was too dark to see. Ever since the latest occurrence I described in this post, I haven't experienced any other events at all. The second floor isn't rented out for Airbnb anymore because my extended family lives there and they haven't reported anything out of the ordinary and haven't felt threatened by anything paranormal. My theory is that if something bad were to happen if we continued to stay there, a benevolent spirit might have lured us away from danger by making us return inside. I believe that spirits in some households are good spirits that look after the household and don't disturb unless needed for safety. It's worth noting that the activity never happens to us, but to a small percentage of Airbnb guests. The spirits might have been angry at the guests for some reason or thought the guests aren't safe for the household. Then again, it could have simply been a mischievous spirit wanting to play a prank.
I've had a spirit animal since I was about 7 years old. He is a black dog, looks identical to the one in the picture. He shows up every time something of grave importance is about to happen, whether good or bad. It's like he appears to say, "Some shit is about to go down, son, ready yourself." He never sticks around for more than a few seconds. I either see him in my peripheral vision, or he will flash across my field of vision, usually appearing from behind an object, and sprinting to another object, disappearing behind it, and never coming out the other side. For years, I just put it down to coincidence and thought I was just seeing shit, and it was one of those tricks of the mind. Until my 18th birthday. My dad paid for me to trek through most of the United States in my college gap year, something I had always wanted to do. I'm a real outdoorsman type of guy. During my adventures, I visited Gooseneck State Park and the Grand Canyon, spent weeks there camping with local Native Americans, exploring and learning their traditional ways of life. I'm part Huron and loved this. One night, we all sat around and they told stories, which was what they usually did at night. Only this time, they pulled out a peace pipe and told me tonight was a very special night. Tonight the spirits visited us and gave us messages for the coming year. I thought this was cool and joined the circle, taking deep hits on this peace pipe. I didn't hallucinate or anything, but I definitely felt high, calm, relaxed, drowsy. All of the men began to chant and sing. A few of them danced, and then they all sat down and took turns going around the circle, telling each other of what the spirits shared with them. It came to me, and I was really nervous. I hadn't seen or heard anything. I didn't know what to say, when all of a sudden, one of the older guys said, "Listen to your spirit, Black Dog." I froze. No one ever called me that. How could he know? Across the fire, sure enough, my black dog darts past from a rocky outcrop. Only for the first time in my life, he pauses in the middle long enough for me to see him good and proper, before continuing on his hurtling path, disappearing into the darkness. I look back down towards the elder, and he is smiling at me, with this knowing look on his face. Everyone in the circle laughs, and the guys sitting beside me pat me on the back and ask what I saw. I tell them all about my dog, and how he has been showing up since I was a young boy, and they all nod and understand. Don't just brush me off or think I'm crazy like everyone else has in my life. They give me some tips on how to be more open to his presence and how to interpret his messages to be more in tune with my ancestry. It was an incredibly spiritual experience. I end my trip sometime later in Colorado, and ever since, I've paid more attention to my little friend, learned to listen to his messages. He saved my ass on more than one occasion with warnings, and soothed me in times of doubt, allowing me to make decisions and take calculated risks more easily by steering me in the right direction.
And once upon a time, in a land not so far away, there lived a character named Gullible. Gullible was a rather ordinary fellow who had an extraordinary penchant for curiosity. He was well-read and particularly fond of the tales of the famous explorer Lemuel Gulliver, as told in the classic novel Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. In fact, he was so fascinated by Gulliver's adventures that he decided to set off on a journey of his own, hoping to experience the world in a similar way. Gullible set sail on a grand ship, embarking on a voyage to uncharted lands. As the waves rocked his vessel, he imagined the grandeur of Gulliver's adventures with giants and tiny Lilliputians. Little did he know that his voyage would be nothing short of extraordinary. His first encounter was with a land of giants, just as Gulliver had experienced. Gullible marveled at the colossal beings who inhabited the land. He watched in awe as they went about their daily routines, their booming voices and gigantic steps making him feel utterly insignificant. As he spent time among them, Gullible realized that the giants were not cruel or malevolent. They simply had their own way of life. Gullible's journey took him to another land, where he encountered a community of tiny people, much like the Lilliputians in Gulliver's tale. The miniature world was enchanting, with its miniature houses, miniature landscapes, and miniature inhabitants. Gullible interacted with the tiny folk, learning about their culture and customs. He discovered that their small size did not diminish their big hearts or their vibrant society. As his travels continued, Gullible encountered many more diverse and wondrous lands. He met strange and fantastical creatures, explored mysterious islands, and ventured into uncharted territories. But with each new encounter, he found himself adopting the perspectives of those he met. He began to understand that the differences between the giants, the tiny people, and the other inhabitants of the world were not reasons for division, but sources of wonder and mutual appreciation. As Gullible's journey reached its climax, he made a profound revelation. He realized that he was not just a passive observer of these different worlds, he was a part of them all. He had been the giants and the tiny people, the strange creatures, and the inhabitants of each new land. He was a reflection of unity that existed in this extraordinary world. With this newfound understanding, Gullible set out to spread a message of unity and peace. He shared his story, explaining that we are all connected regardless of our differences. He inspired others to embrace and seek common ground, and to work towards a world where understanding and compassion prevailed. In the end, Gullible's journey was not just a personal adventure, but a beacon of hope for a world in desperate need of it. His tale became a symbol of the potential for harmony and unity among all people, regardless of their size, culture, or beliefs. As Gullible's story spread far and wide, it ignited a global movement for peace and understanding. His message was clear. In a world where we can be giants and tiny people alike, there is hope for a future where peace would reign forever. And so, the legacy of Gullible became a testament to the power of empathy and the boundless possibilities of a world united in hope and love.
When you dream, you return temporarily to the other world / astral realm / spirit world / ether, the world of unconsolidated matter where psychic energy shapes forms and events. This occurs because the sleeping dream state is an altered state of consciousness in which you once again exist merely in your disembodied spirit form. You go back to simply being your non-physical body, your etheric body, astral body, energy body. I know some people distinguish between several different non-physical bodies, but I don't know about that. For me, these terms are all interchangeable. Ordinarily, when you dream, you are by yourself within your own little domain in the spirit world. Basically, your own personal property in there. You are shielded from malevolent spirits by your own natural psychic defenses and protected by your guardian demon. Most of the forms and events that go down in there are your own psychic energies unfolding as a strange dream narrative imbued with symbolic dream logic. That is why they have meaning even though they may seem nonsensical. The meaning can be profound and deep, or relatively trivial and insubstantial. Most of the characters, monsters, and strange beings you encounter are just your own subconscious content, taking on a form that you experience as a dream sensory phenomenon.
But as your psychic power level increases and you become more aware of the wider reality of the cosmos, your intent almost certainly will start to include the content of this other world. Gods, spirits, demons, and the intent and desire to perform deeds within this realm. As you become aware of the other world, you will likely want to assert your will in there. I think this is when one begins to have more profound dreams, often with perennial symbolism. You may even begin encountering beings who overwhelmingly are felt to be independent of yourself. If you additionally start to become lucid in your dreams, even stranger things will start happening, and your ability to consciously navigate this world will improve. In my experience, it won't be long until you start having direct interactions with other beings, receive telepathic communications that you experience clearly to originate from without yourself, gain energy boons from gods and/or spirits, and so on. If you also cultivate an awareness of your etheric body, meditating on the chakras, and gain the ability to actually physically feel them, etc., you will be able to orient yourself even better in the other world.
The quiet and forgotten of society are often the most open to non-human entities for many reasons. Often they are like the weak, unhealthy, and old animals which stray from the safety of the herd, making them ideal targets for predators. But sometimes they just seem safer to approach, or more open to things other than human social cues. But to be honest, when dealing with non-human entities like spirits, angels, and demons, it is just impossible to fathom their motivations. They do not obey the rules of beings of flesh. Why they choose some and not others is simply something beyond our grasp. Pay attention to the signs you are given, but do not take them as necessarily benevolent, or purely malevolent either. Non-human entities very often have inscrutable motives, but for the most part they are selfish to an extreme. They may be helping you, but it may not be for your long-term good. So observe, but be extremely careful to trust. Always maintain a sense of caution and common sense lest you be deceived. And last, and this is harsh, but also, always be quick to question your sanity. Schizophrenia is very real, and when you suffer it, the illness can easily overwhelm your sense of judgment. Try to hold on to whatever common sense you have. If the signs are pointing you to things you would be hesitant to tell other people about, for whatever reason, absolutely do not trust them.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.